told her if she ever left, he'd kill her. We believe that he tortured her for some time.
I think he works very hard at being a con man.
Little did I think I would never, ever see her again. He is so convincing.
Welcome to Inside Crime. I'm Leila McKinnon. All three stories tonight are motivated by utter greed, with one tragically ending in murder. Glenys Heyward was a battered wife, and after years of vicious domestic violence, she escaped and found a new life, or so she thought. Later, the story of a deluded con man with multiple identities who tried to fool everyone he came into contact with. But now, a Casanova con man. He scammed millions from the women he was married and engaged to. He may look like an ordinary bloke, but this is one of Australia's most cunning con men, a ruthless operator who's fleeced millions from family, friends, the rich and the poor.
There is no moral limit to Paul Carter. No limit.
I don't care. I mean, what difference does it make?
Anyone in Paul Carter's path is potential prey.
He's not your average con man. I mean, he's the worst of the worst.
I don't have any money, dude. I didn't take any money from fucking anybody.
Everybody's life that he's touched has been damaged.
Brooklyn's heartbreaking saga began the day she stumbled across Paul Carter's dating profile back in 2002. A single, child-free multi-millionaire from Melbourne's upper crust. Before long, Brooklyn was spellbound by his charm.
He was the greatest lover. He was the greatest romancer. He was the smartest guy in the room. He seemed to be able to do anything and everything. I thought, you know, this guy's going to protect me and take care of me, and I'm going to be safe with him.
Paul Carter was really a twice-married father of three working as a tradie in the suburbs of Melbourne. But the deception, driven by greed, would only deepen. As the daughter of a multi-millionaire property developer, Paul valued the weight of Brooklyn's wallet more than the size of her heart. By marrying her in 2003 and having a son shortly after, Paul earned more than just a family.
I was his retirement fund. Undoubtedly, he was looking at the long-term picture.
To fund his lavish lifestyle, Paul borrowed money from Brooklyn's family under the guise of legitimate loans.
$2 million between myself and my father.
His repayments relied on a multi-million euro inheritance that he was due to receive from an Italian relative. A lie that he'd go to extraordinary lengths to maintain.
And he's showing me bank statements and a whole array of other documentation which he'd produced fraudulently.
Like this forged letter, which purported to be from the Italian Ministry of Finance relating to the transfer of Paul's inheritance.
There was always enough of the truth in his lies for it to be believable.
In 2014, they decided to move to the United States to give their young family a fresh start. Paul sent his wife and son over first, claiming he needed time to wrap up work in Australia. But in reality, other plans were at play. One night, not long after she moved, Brooklyn was woken by her frantic son.
He walked into my bedroom and he said, "Who's this lady in the picture with Dad?"
Paul Carter, arm in arm with another woman, attending an engagement party in Melbourne. As it turned out, it was his own. The bombshell blonde, his new fiancée, and his next victim.
Can you imagine finding out that about your dad? He's supposed to be your superhero, and now he's nothing to him. He's just an embarrassment.
The lady in red was Catherine Dubois, a single mother from Melbourne who was looking for love. Like many who crossed Paul's path, she too was hypnotised by the charismatic conman who promised her the world.
He was the Prince Charming, the knight that was going to come and rescue me and turn my life around.
But as she would soon discover, the fantasy he offered was nothing more than a facade.
The Paul that I love does not exist, never did.
So what did he tell you about his life at that stage when you first met up?
That he was a self-made multimillionaire and that he had come from a privileged background. I've got 2 Ferraris, I've got Lamborghinis, I've got Porsches. He'd been single for years and that he had been searching for his forever princess all that time.
Blinded by his extraordinary display of wealth, Catherine was open about her own, revealing that her beauty salon was soon to be bought by the government to make way for estate development.
Technically, it should have been nearly $300,000.
With her payout imminent, Paul wasted no time in making their relationship official. 12 weeks after meeting her, and while his family was overseas, the married man proposed with a 3.5-carat diamond ring, which she'd later discover was fake.
He just said I was the love of his life and that he wanted to spend the rest of it with me and he wanted our life to start now. He didn't want to wait. He wanted me to make him the happiest man in the world.
Their plan was to move to New York City, where they'd live in a multi-million-dollar penthouse overlooking Central Park.
But it suited the story, it suited his backstory that all of this belonged with the Maseratis and the Astons that he used as leverage to make you believe that he had money.
Once engaged, Paul convinced her to sign over legal rights to her salon so he could negotiate the payout on her behalf.
Why did you do that?
Well, because there was a lot of stress involved in it and I was trying to run the business and deal with lawyers. And then there was Paul, who was just such a rich multi-millionaire man that he wasn't going to be interested in my meagre $250,000, $300,000 payout. I did trust him.
After accepting his proposal, Paul threw a no-expenses-spared engagement party at the State Library in Melbourne. Unbeknownst to her, he put the bills in Catherine's name. Together, they looked the part. He dressed in black tie, she in a custom-made couture gown, dripping in what she'd later learn were fake jewels.
The fake necklace. This is meant to be $250,000 worth of diamonds. I can't comprehend it to this day.
Of all that he faked, perhaps it was the story about the fate of his wife that was most disturbing.
She died of bone cancer 8 years before he met me. You can't come up to someone and question them about a story like that, so then it becomes an untouchable backstory. Pretty clever.
Soon after their engagement party, Paul's lies began to unravel. Within 2 weeks, Catherine received a message from a fake Facebook account warning her that Paul's wife was still alive.
He's playing both you and his wife. Neither of you know about each other. He was married with a child and everything he'd told me was a lie. I needed to get out. I felt my reality go into a fog.
To tell people that someone is dead, the mother of your child and the woman that you are currently married to died of bone cancer is so despicable, it takes it to a whole other level.
Paul's wife, Brooklyn Carter, was indeed alive and well. While he was celebrating his engagement to another woman, she was busy in America setting up a new life for their young family. Once Paul's lies were exposed, he flew there in an attempt to right his remarkable wrongs.
He's still the father of my child at that point, and I'm still in a country where I don't know anyone with big plans for us to start a new life here, and he preyed on that.
Paul stayed in the United States, where he now works as a self-employed tradie in Albany, New York.
Paul Carter.
When the reporter tracked him down to question his ways, the convincing con man offered very unconvincing excuses.
Why would you tell Catherine that your partner had died of bone cancer?
Yeah, that was a mistake. because I was going through a bad time with my then wife, and it was just a mistake.
It wasn't the only mistake Paul claimed to have made.
What about the Italian inheritance that didn't exist?
There isn't one.
Was that another mistake?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
That's how little it means to him. So what? You know, it was just a mistake and probably won't happen again, you know, and that's just his way of getting out of that, being confronted about it.
Frank Abagnale knows the mindset of a con man better than most. That's because he was one. Frank is known as the greatest scammer of all time. Today, he's considered one of the world's most respected security consultants, advising top intelligence agencies, including the FBI, here in Washington, D.C. He says Paul's greed is built into his DNA.
Paul Carter is an individual who this is just a way of life to him. So if tomorrow he were to get $10 million from an individual, he would just go on to the next person. As long as it makes him richer, he really doesn't care about who he hurts or whose feelings he hurts or whose money he steals.
It seems that it's easier for him to con people than it is to work. You know what? In all honesty, I think he works very hard at being a con man.
Paul Carter hasn't just conned women. In 2010, he talked his way into a job as the boss of the Uniting Church's charity, United Housing Victoria. Things went bad, fast. Money was unaccounted for and income dropped by 85%. A fraud investigation was launched and Carter was immediately let go.
That's all part of that game. So he makes all these things work. He meets the right people, he gets people to vouch for who he says he is, he does the online profiles, and then when he gets the money, there's great satisfaction that he scammed you.
So I keep hearing this, but I don't know who you're talking about.
There are con men and then there are con men, and there are very dangerous con men that will go through any length to get to their final end. And if they think that I'm being found out, then they become aggressive and then they become dangerous as well.
Catherine can attest to such aggression. When she confronted Paul about his double life, she says she was met with rage.
I think at this point he realised that I was going to be the person that was going to shatter his facade. And I think that he was now pulling out all stops to try and silence me.
Despite her mounting fear, she gave Paul a chance to make amends.
When I went back to him, he only could pretend to love me for, I believe it was like 48 hours. And then he assaulted me.
Well, it's not right. I can tell you that much. It's not right. It's pissed me off that she... And actually, in actual fact, I'm going to prove that it's not right because I have an email from Catherine to say, if you don't give me this, I'm going to say that you did that.
Back in upstate New York, Brooklyn Carter is trying to make peace with her past. At the end of their relationship, Brooklyn took out an AVO against Paul. When she finally called it quits on their marriage, she too was met with rage.
He threatened to kill himself and take me out as well. Now my son sleeps with a knife next to his bed, and I sleep with a weapon next to my bed. I don't know what he's capable of anymore. I don't know the person that I was married to for all those years, and I'm not prepared to take the risk.
After 16 years of marriage, Brooklyn finalised her divorce. But that hasn't stopped Paul from getting remarried for the 4th time. His new wife is Kelly Sayers, the lawyer who represented him during his divorce proceedings.
He couldn't afford a lawyer, so he's telling her he loves her, and she's believing it. And I'm thinking to myself, I have heard all that before. I feel like everybody's looking at me saying, what sort of an idiot are you? But I have a degree in business and a degree in law. I'm not an idiot. It's just, I was so manipulated by him, and I really wanted to make the relationship work.
They're not stupid. They've been scammed and they've been conned. You can't just write it off as, well, that woman was foolish and she shouldn't have got involved with that guy. That's not the case. This is a criminal who defrauded someone, needs to be brought to justice for doing that.
Clearly, nobody's going to get their money back from him, but I think he needs to be held accountable. I mean, he needs to go to jail for what he's done. Anyone else would.
This next story is about trust and how one woman was lured to her death by a son she loved. For Glenys Heyward, this was her tragic reality. This is the story of a crime so heartless that it challenges our very notion of family. The murder of Glenys Heyward. Glenys died at the hands of her violent, controlling husband, Neil, after years of abuse. But it was the treachery of her youngest son, Matthew, that makes this crime so shocking.
I'll never forgive Matthew. Never.
He lured his mother to a house where his vengeful father was waiting to kill her.
It's hard to imagine what must have gone through her mind, knowing that the son that she thought she could trust and loved has betrayed her.
As we'll discover, it was a murder planned in minute detail between father and son.
She thought that Matthew still loved her. She was very, very happy about that. She never came back.
We are treating her disappearance as suspicious.
Kidnapped, tortured, and bashed to death. And then thrown into a septic pit and buried. Glenys Heyward, a 53-year-old mother of two, had been missing for 4 months when her body was found on a remote property in Western Victoria.
I really knew there was something major had happened to her. Clearly we knew that, or we felt that Neil was right behind this. He was the one that had so much to lose.
Neil Heyward was a violent, controlling and obsessive man.
She was afraid not to do what he wanted.
For over 20 years, he physically and mentally abused his wife, Glynis.
I knew straight away. I knew what had happened, that he had killed her.
Glynis and Neil Heyward were once in love. They had 2 boys, Thomas and Matthew, and for more than 20 years ran a lucrative dairy farm on the outskirts of Mount Gambier in South Australia.
I guess they must have had some good times when they first met, but it just deteriorated, yeah.
The beatings were ferocious and frequent. Glynis confided in close friend Marie Johnson that she feared Neil would eventually kill her.
She was scared of him. I mean, he's beaten her up so badly sometimes, nearly killed her. And he used to brag to people how he tied the missus up last night and gave her a bloody hiding.
We heard lots of other stories as time went on about her being found tied to a chair inside the house and was found by a stock agent. He released her, she went to the toilet, came back out and begged him to tie her back up again so Neil would find her in the same position when he got home. So a lot of horrific domestic violence.
Finally, Glynis had had enough. At the end of 2006, she walked out of the family home, leaving her abusive husband Neil and 2 sons Thomas and Matthew behind.
If you're told often enough that you're a piece of shit, you start believing it.
Glynis moved 2 hours away to a dairy property where she got a job as a farmhand. But from the outset, she was paranoid that Neil would track her down. She wouldn't tell any of her co-workers her name or her phone number, and she always had her car packed with her belongings, ready to flee at a moment's notice. But Glynis's life was about to change. After years of abuse, she found freedom, happiness, and a new man who treated her with respect, Chris Sigston. It was only 3 months before she disappeared.
We were trying to take it slowly because I didn't want her to rush into anything after being in that situation. I didn't want to think that I was taking advantage of her. The first thing she noticed when she came to my house was we had a bath. Oh, she said a bath. She'd come back from the dairy and jump in the bath with a heap of bubbly stuff and she'd have a glass of white wine. It was good.
With a new life, a new man, and unprecedented freedom and happiness, Glynis began divorce proceedings. She wanted $2 million of their $6 million estate. But it made Neil so furious that he'd lost control of her, now he wanted her dead.
She was just virtually in fear of her life because he told her if she ever left, he'd kill her. He just didn't want to give Glynis a penny. He told her that. He said, "You'll never get a penny out of me if you leave."
Because Neil intended to kill her.
He would probably have to give her half of his estate, and he wouldn't want that. He's a spiteful man and a selfish man. He wouldn't want to share anything with Glynis.
In the months leading up to her murder, Neil had done his best to turn his sons, Thomas and Matthew, against their mother, claiming there would be nothing left of their inheritance after the divorce settlement. He set about luring Glynis back to Mount Gambier, using their youngest son, Matthew, as the bait.
The whole thing was just a trap to get her to come down to Mount Gambier. She definitely trusted Matthew and she loved him, and she was very, very happy that she thought that he still loved her.
Matthew had been totally brainwashed by his father, and he knowingly took part in a plot to kill his mother, inviting her to Mount Gambier for dinner. Glynis made the trip back to Matthew's on the 23rd of July, 2017, oblivious to her fate.
One of the best things I ever did was I said, "Well, this is a bit stupid." I said, I love you. I told her I loved her before she left, so I'm very glad I did that. That was the last time I saw her.
He had told her he loved her. And she was so excited. Nobody had ever told her that. And she was excited because she was going to see Matthew, whom she trusted. That was the happiest I have ever seen her.
This CCTV footage from the Mount Gambier RSL captured Glynis and Marie at 5 o'clock that evening. It was the last time she would be seen in public. Glenys Heyward was elated to be visiting with her son, but for Matthew, it was all an act. What she didn't know was at that very same time, her husband Neil and an accomplice, farmhand Jeremy Minter, were preparing to kill her.
I think Jeremy, hard to say without putting a label on him, but I don't think he's not the smartest tool. He's in the shed, old Jeremy, and I think he got sucked in a lot by Neil. Neil's a very controlling sort of person, and I think he just wanted to please Neil.
Sometime that evening, Matthew asked Glynis to visit a house he was considering buying. But it was a terrible lie. Instead, he led his mother into a fatal trap.
Matthew walks in with his mother. Jeremy and Neil jump out. They grab Glynis and throw her to the ground. And at that stage, Matthew just turns around and walks out. Neil then starts kicking her in the head, and she starts to bleed from the nose. He then, with Jeremy's help, they hog-tie her with rope.
And then she was loaded into a wheelie bin and was put on the back of this four-wheel drive ute and then driven to another property outside Mount Gambier.
At that point, Neil's accomplice, Jeremy Minter, is dropped off, and Neil heads off to the Victorian border with Glynis in the back of the ute, beaten and barely alive.
You can't imagine the fear that she would have been going through. She would have been alive in that wheelie bin, in pain after being assaulted. And she would know that Neil was taking her somewhere to kill her. She would have known that.
The following day, Glynis never returned home to her boyfriend, Chris Sigston.
And I just started ringing a phone non-stop, and it was just ringing out and going to message bank.
Chris Sigston reported Glenys Heyward missing on the 27th of July, 2007. When police interviewed her son Matthew, the last person known to have seen her alive, he already had a story worked out with his father to tell them.
I'm going to go in and talk to the police for a few minutes. I'd appreciate it if you just leave me alone.
He told us that she arrived at his house at about 6 p.m. that night. She cooked dinner for him. He said that about, sometime during the evening, she received a phone call. She said it was from a male friend, and this male friend was going to come round and collect her about 10:30, and they were going to go off for a little holiday over into Melbourne for a couple of weeks.
But the police didn't buy that story.
Her car was left there, her belongings were left there, her medications was left there, and she just apparently walked out late at night to travel interstate with some other person, which the son never identified or he never made any inquiries about. It just, the whole thing was a bit suspicious.
At that stage, we had strong suspicions that both he and his father were involved in her disappearance, and she'd met with foul play.
Without a body, the police could only keep the pressure on both father and son and hope a crack emerged. And soon enough, it did. Police needed a breakthrough, and of all places, it came at the local pub. A young man was chatting with a bouncer when he boasted that he'd murdered Glenys. What was important about him and his story was his link to Neil Heyward. It was Jeremy Minter, the farmhand who helped Neil carry out the terrible crime.
Lucky in one way that the farmhand had a big mouth.
Adelaide major crime detectives and Victoria Police converged on the property this morning, about 30 kilometres across the border.
4 months after Glynis waved goodbye to her new boyfriend Chris, her body was found in a septic pit just over the border in Victoria.
Only Neil knows how long it was before he finally killed her. We believe that he tortured her for some time.
Glenys's youngest son and Minter were essential parts of a plot to murder the 54-year-old.
Glenys Heyward's youngest son, Matthew, along with Jeremy Minter, were arrested for their role in her murder.
I'll never forgive Matthew. Never.
Now he was under arrest, but catching his father, Neil, wasn't as easy.
Negotiators were called in, but the wanted man wasn't going quietly. Police say he claimed to be armed and in possession of a bomb.
Police found Neil holed up in a house 80 kilometres from Mount Gambier.
He told us that he wasn't coming out and he had a stick of gel ignite.
And finally, after some hours, 7 hours I believe, they accessed the house and found him. There was a lot of blood in the house. He had self-inflicted some stab wounds on himself.
Neil Heyward was then charged with the murder of his estranged wife, but he'd never be found guilty. He hanged himself in jail while awaiting trial.
You'd like to see the man convicted, but I think he's cheated a lot of people out of that by doing what he did do.
And then he took the easy way out. Everybody said to me, I bet you're glad he's dead. And I said, no, I'm not. Because he was a control freak. He controlled his wife, and he would have been in jail the rest of his life being controlled by somebody else. That's why he hung himself. Matthew kept on saying in court that he just wanted to get Glynis there so his father could actually talk to her. It's quite possible that Matthew thought that that was the truth. But then when he got her there and they grabbed him, why did he leave? Could have backed his mother up.
Today, Matthew Heyward and farmhand Jeremy Minter are serving life sentences for murder with a non-parole period of 23 years.
Oh, well, I was glad I had the time with it that I did. But I just, every now and again, I think to myself, I wonder what we'd be doing now if we were together. Yeah.
Goran Markovic is a greedy con man like no other. Delusional, slimy and heartless, he's taken many victims for an emotional and expensive ride. But now finally, the tables have turned.
Goran Markovic. Capable. Conniving. He's an old-fashioned con man who exploits people's weaknesses. And he defrauds them of everything they got.
This is Goran Markovic, A man who makes his living robbing the unsuspecting and the trusting. In 2002, Detective Bob Brisby was called in to investigate Goran Markovic. Detective Brisby got his man, but Markovic got bail, saw his chance and skipped the country.
And when I went to pick him up, couldn't find him. And a day or two later, just sitting in the office, I got a phone call. And it was Goran saying, Bob, just wanted to let you know that I was too good for you. I've gone from the country. So, and you'll never get me and I'm never coming back. I said, yeah, fair cop, Goran, okay. Might not be this week, this month or this year, but I'm sure we'll meet again.
For the past 15 years, this tenacious copper has been on Markovic's tail, keeping track as he crisscrossed the world. The 58-year-old con travelled on false passports, impersonated army colonels, ASIO and Interpol agents, and claimed to be a pilot. No matter the lie, it always came with a con. And no matter where he was, there was always time to taunt Bob by phone and with postcards. Unaware at the time that Goran Markovic was a scammer, travelling Australian Kelly Bolter was smitten when they met at a youth hostel in 2014.
He started telling me that he was very wealthy and he had done many assignments for Asia on and off over the years.
They quickly bonded as fellow Australians abroad and, like travellers often do, decided to take a road trip together. Little did Kelly know she was being groomed to fund this man's outlandish odyssey.
It's odd to say, but at the beginning I felt very safe with him. I guess I started seeing him as an older father figure.
They ended up in Brussels, where things got truly bizarre.
He was investigating an assassin of an American oil executive there, and it had gone terribly wrong, he said, and that this international crime gang knew of my existence and my life was in danger. So we basically left Brussels in a hurry. Now we're on the run.
As far-fetched as this sounds, Markovic's scam of Kelly was cemented by elaborate detail, which convinced her they were both in danger.
And it did have the ASIO logo with it as well.
Kelly started receiving direct communications signed by Todd Brown, who claimed to be assistant director of ASIO, the man Goran told her was his boss.
They now have over 400 personnel.
In more than 50 emails from Brown, Kelly was told she had every reason to feel terrified.
They have red flagged all the accounts.
Do you think that Todd Brown ever sent you emails? Or...
No. I think that Goran Markovic wrote all the emails.
At the time, Kelly did not know this. She truly believed Todd Brown was real, even as Markovic's claims became wilder and wilder. Markovic told Kelly he now had to go on the run from his own people at ASIO. He was also wanted by the US Secret Service, and don't forget the nasty international crime gang that was out for his blood, so by default, Kelly's too.
Just take me to your mindset during this 7 months. I mean, did you for that entire time believe that you were on the run? Did you believe that your life was in danger?
I did.
As an Australian in a foreign city, Kelly was incredibly fearful and cut off from the familiar.
I was extremely isolated. I was travelling alone. I didn't know anyone at all.
By now, Kelly was completely at the mercy of Markovic, who'd become her tormentor. He'd taken her credit card and had started to abuse her. At other times, he'd leave Kelly stranded, claiming to be on another assignment.
I was scared for my life, and I just... He took my passport, he just stranded me, literally. I felt like I was being held hostage.
Markovic kept Kelly captive by falsely claiming she'd be detained indefinitely by authorities if she tried to leave Europe. In the end, even that was a better prospect than staying with her abuser. And as she found, of course, she was free to return home. Markovic stole $120,000 from Kelly and her family. After she escaped, he turned his attention to conning people in France, kind enough to give him work. The scams placed Goran under the spotlight of international authorities, and he was deported back to Australia in 2016, back into the hands of Detective Bob Brisby.
Did you always think you'd get this man?
No. But I maintained with international authorities when he was coming back into the country. That's when, rather than just monitoring and watching and listening, we were able actually to act and pick him up.
Markovic was eventually convicted of one of his many previous frauds and was sentenced to 18 months jail. But even while incarcerated, Goran Markovic was up to his old tricks, cooking up his next scam with victim Julie Maximovic. A fellow inmate who was a relative of Julie's had got them talking.
I found a best friend. The way he spoke, how gentle he was, how understanding he was, how supportive he was.
Markovic persuaded Julie to lend him $20,000, but would pay back Julie double the amount she lent him, an irresistible deal of $40,000 in return.
Everyone deserves a second chance in life. Let's help him.
She admits she was too trusting of a man she'd only ever spoken to on the phone and who was in jail for fraud at the time.
I began to share these sort of stories with my daughter, Susanna.
So he's a serial scammer posted as ASIO agent.
And she immediately said to me, Mum, get away from this man. There is nothing in the world like this person. He is so convincing.
Confirming their suspicions were online warnings about Markovic from Kelly Bolter, who had lost her life savings to the con man. But now the tables were turned and he was her target.
I realise it is quite a bizarre, unbelievable story now, and so I was trying to gather as much information to prove it.
Kelly now had an ally in Julie, who was tired of Markovic's tall tales. Now out of jail, he made countless promises to pay Julie back.
You'll get the money today, you'll get the money tomorrow, you'll get it the day after, and it kept going and going in different stories, different lies.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, how are you?
And while filming with Julie, we got to hear some of those lies.
Right.
She's in a coma.
Oh, my.
The first lie is extraordinary. Markovic tries to play on Julie's sympathy and claims his mother is in a coma.
She's still not responsive, but she twitched a couple of times, which could be I think it could be a good...
Oh, for sure, Goran. If she twitched or any little movement, that's a big sign.
Yeah, I think so.
But this is Goran's mother. Frail, but clearly not in a coma as she delivers plastics to the recycling bin.
Which hospital is she in? Because I'd like to send some flowers.
Some flowers. No flowers. I just want it to get better.
I know, but what are doctors saying, please?
Nothing.
Goran Markovic swindled Kelly Bolter's life savings and $20,000 from Julie Maximovic. So, together, Julie and Kelly are working to finally bring down this career fraudster.
I just want the opportunity to face him one last time and to reinforce that I'm a strong person and that he didn't beat me.
As part of the plan, Julie has managed to convince Markovic to visit her today. 3 hidden cameras placed around the apartment will capture their every move. In the room next door, Kelly will watch and wait.
I feel like I'm dreaming. I feel like this is a nightmare, and this is something I have to do.
Running late, Markovic doesn't bother to call Julie, but leaves his home and appears to be heading towards her location.
He's getting out of the car now. He's walking to the back of the car. I'm filming him.
Kelly has been waiting for this day for more than 3 years. Despite her rising anxiety, Julie keeps her wits as she welcomes Goran in. They talk on the balcony. He tells Julie his mother now needs a $60,000 hip replacement. As for the money he owes Julie, he claims regrettably and without further explanation that it's been stopped by AUSTRAC, a government agency that investigates money laundering and terrorism. And then it's time for Kelly to face her demon.
Hello, Goran Markovic. You know Kelly, obviously.
I do.
You do.
You're a liar, Goran, and I've exposed you for the liar that you are and the criminal that you are, and we want our money back.
You yourself lied that I held you hostage. You
I've not lied about anything.
You lied that
People know you for the fraudster and the liar that you are. Right? And where's our money? We want our money back.
You lied.
And I want an apology, and I want you back in jail. That's where you belong.
Is that right?
Yes, it is.
You lied. You guys finished?
No, we're not finished.
For a con, Markovic forgot one of the first rules of engagement. On arrival, he didn't take note of his closest exit.
Is that right?
The further he walks, the more he denies, and the larger the lies. Markovic finally sees his escape route. As Goran speeds away, back in the apartment, Kelly and Julie are mostly relieved.
It wasn't as scary as I thought, and he didn't intimidate me like he did before.
Hello?
But even now, Markovic wants the last word. Within minutes, he calls Julie to taunt her. If only she had waited, she would have got her money.
So he's not denying my money. He said, you should have waited till Tuesday, Wednesday, you would have had your money. This has been going on for 6 months.
Needless to say, Julie has given up ever seeing her money again. Kelly continues to work on warning others unlucky enough to ever encounter Goran Markovic, as does the good detective Bob Brisby, who is all too aware of the pain behind the farce.
That's the biggest tragedy of it all. They're real people, families, and just trying to make their way. You're just being defrauded at the basis level of trust. It's very sad. It's the old saying that if there is doubt, there is no doubt. If you're thinking, should I be giving this person or mortgaging my house for this person, don't do it. Plain and simple.